Okay, we're going to be going over this topic on the cornfield. Jesus and his disciples, when they walked through the cornfield, how most of Christianity claims that Jesus broke the Sabbath. That would be false. That would be error on humanity. Jesus did not break the Sabbath, or else it would have been in vain for him to die on the cross for us. So here we go. Let's go to Matthew chapter 12, starting on 1 all the way to 8. It says, "At that time, Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were and hungered." In other words, his disciples were hungry and began to pluck the ears of corn and to eat. The disciples plucked the ears of corn. It doesn't say Jesus plucked it. It says the disciples plucked it. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto Jesus, "Behold, the disciples do that which is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath day." In other words, the Pharisees were accusing the disciples of breaking the Sabbath, which was illegal. That's what the Pharisees would see, the very ones that Jesus said that he called hypocrites. It says, "But he said unto them," Jesus said to them, "Have ye not read what David did when he was an hungered, and they that were with him?" Remember what David and his men, they were hungry, both David and his men. "How he entered into the house of God and did eat the showbread." David and his men ate the showbread because they were hungry, which was not lawful. In other words, which wasn't illegal for David and his men to eat the showbread. "Neither for them which were with him," David and his men, there we go again, "but only for the priest." It says it wasn't illegal for David and his men to eat the showbread, but it was illegal for the priest to eat the showbread. "Or have ye not read in the law how that on the Sabbath days the priest in the temple profane or irreverence the Sabbath and are blameless?" See, here we go. They're being hypocrites again because they're blaming something that they do themselves. When they're setting up the showbread to setting it up, why aren't they calling that working? But yet Jesus says, you guys are profaning it, irreverence it, but you're blameless. It says, "But I say unto you that this place is one greater than the temple. But if ye have not known what this meaneth, I will have mercy and not sacrifice. Ye will have not condemned the guiltless." See, they were guiltless. They didn't break the Sabbath. So you guys that say that we don't have to obey the Sabbath because of this, you guys are in error. Okay, let's go to Mark chapter 2, starting on 23. This is another incident that Mark wrote. Mark chapter 2. This is Mark's version. And it's going to say the same thing. Mark chapter 2, starting on 23. It says, "And it came to pass that he went through the cornfields," Jesus in the cornfields on the Sabbath day, "and his disciples," Jesus and his disciples went through the cornfield and began as they went to pluck the ears of the corn. And and his disciples began, remember the disciples again, as they went to pluck the corn, ears of corn. And the Pharisees said unto him, Behold, why do they on the Sabbath day that which is not lawful?" Which the Pharisees says that was illegal. And the Pharisees' eyes, it was illegal to them. They erred because it wasn't illegal. Here, let's read some more on verse 25. Mark chapter 2, verse 25. "And he said unto them, Have ye never read what David did when he had need and was an hungered, he and they that were with him? how he went into the house of God in the days that Abiathar, the high priest, and did eat the showbread. So David and his men ate the showbread. They were hungry, so the priest gave them the showbread to eat. It says, and Jesus says, which was not lawful, which wasn't illegal for David and his men to eat the showbread, but for the priest. It was only for the priest that it would have been illegal. If the priest ate it as something common, it would have been illegal. They would have been breaking the Sabbath. And gave also to them which were with him, David and his men. So they got to eat the showbread because it wasn't illegal for them. They wasn't breaking the Sabbath. Only for the priest. And he said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. So God created the Sabbath for us to identify our Creator. When you rest on the seventh day, we know who our Creator is. Therefore, the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. There's nowhere in these Bible verses that says that we don't have to obey the Sabbath or keep the Ten Commandments. So we need to obey the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath. Jesus did not break it, because if he did, it would have been in vain for him to die for us on the cross. Okay, let's go to Luke chapter 6. Luke's got his own version. Luke chapter 6, starting on verse 1. And it came to pass on the second Sabbath. In other words, it was 1 week, and then the next week, the Sabbath. So after the first week, and let me read this again. And it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first, that he went through the cornfields, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn, and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. And a certain of the Pharisees said unto them, why do ye that which is not lawful? Here we go. The Pharisees are accusing them again. The very ones that Jesus called hypocrites. And in another chapter, the Pharisees says, why do ye eat that which is not lawful, which was illegal? The Pharisees are claiming that they were doing something illegal on the Sabbath. And here we go. Jesus is going to correct them and saying that they weren't. I'm paraphrasing. And Jesus answering them said, have ye not read so much as this, what David did when himself was hungry? I'm paraphrasing. It says hungered. Was and hungered, and they which were with him. So David and his men were hungry. How he went into the house of God and did take and eat the showbread. So David and his men ate the showbread, and gave also to them that were with him. So David and his men, and I guess the others that were with him, which it is not lawful, which wasn't illegal. Jesus said it wasn't illegal for them to eat the showbread. But for who? But for the priest alone, for the priest only. It was illegal for the priest to use the showbread as something common to eat, but not for David and his men. And remember, Jesus didn't pluck the ears of corn. It was the disciples. Jesus already knew this ahead of time, that they would have accused him. So he protected himself ahead of time by not doing what the men were doing. But if he did, he didn't break the Sabbath. So that is on the going through the cornfields, the disciples and Jesus. So those of you guys claiming that Jesus broke the Sabbath because of the going through the cornfield, that is an error on your guys' part. Jesus did not break the Sabbath. So, and it doesn't say anywhere that we do not have to keep the Sabbath because of you guys claiming that he broke the Sabbath, which I just read to you guys. He didn't break the Sabbath, neither did the disciples. It was the disciples that plucked the ears of corn, not Jesus. And the accusers were who? The Pharisees. Who do you want to believe, the Pharisees, or do you want to believe Jesus? That's it for today. And have a Sabbath delight. That's what the scriptures say. And have a Sabbath delight, you guys. Take care.